Welcome back to my studying, my fellow fans of the written word, or should I say, constant readers. A new Stephen King book is something like a holiday for me. And when it's a short story collection, it's like Christmas. And today I will be talking about his new collection called If It Bleeds. And it contains 4 novellas. So let's go through them one by one. So first novella is called Mr. Harrigan's Phone. And here King goes to a very familiar literary well. The best way to describe it would be imagine apt pupil with any of the stories of growing up in a smaller town. And it is told through first person, through a boy named Craig. He's a precocious boy, he lives with his dad, and an old and rich billionaire moves into town, and he notices Craig reading in the church, and he invites him to read to him, to water his plants, to keep him company every once in a while. And this rich billionaire, Mr. Harrigan, in turn, pays him, sends him postcards and scratch lottery tickets for holidays as a bonus. And one time, one of the scratch tickets lands him a modest amount of money. And since Mr. Harrigan is somewhat of a Luddite, the boy buys him an iPhone to show his gratitude. And the man is hesitant at first, but once he's shown the basics, it kind of reinvigorates his hunger for keeping up with the world with information. Things like reading the stock market, watching his favorite country performers on YouTube, things like that. So they have this odd sort of mentor friendship going on for a couple of years until Mr. Harrigan passes away. Craig finds him dead in his house, and since they've been talking via text messages all this time, and he is stricken with grief, once the funeral comes around, he leaves Mr. Harrigan's phone in his coffin with him and tries to move on with his life. Only he can't, because next morning he receives a message from him about not bothering to water the flowers, and essentially he tries to dial the phone, and when he dials the phone, it actually goes through, the call goes through, but the dead man doesn't answer, not via voice, but he does listen. And when a bully targets Craig, or when his favorite teacher doesn't receive justice over her death, good Mr. Harrigan listens. And that's about for the plot. Now, I've been reading King my whole life. He is and always will be my favorite author. And what I appreciate about this story in particular is the restraint. He could have easily went and made this nihilistic giant bloodbath of an ending where the dead man invades the world of the living through phones, or it isn't even a dead man, it's an eldritch being impersonating someone from beyond. He would have written any number of even his own tropes, but he doesn't. Instead, Craig calls him one last time after his teacher is avenged, thanks him for his friendship, and just chucks the phone into the sea and leaving it at that. He chooses to walk away, which is something different. In tales like Apt Pupil, when there's a similar mentor relationship, it goes really bad. And the parallels are here because we know that Mr. Harrigan is not a nice person. He is cordial with Craig, but we know, and by his own admission, he amassed this large fortune, and he did not do that by being a nice guy. But I don't even think the whole point is about characters specifically, because a large portion of the tale is about relationship and codependency with phones, with information, but it's more like, to use Mr. Harrigan's or Mr. King's words, once the tube paste is out of the tube, what do? You can't put it back, that's it, right? I give this 4 stars. This was probably my favorite in the collection. It's vintage King, but not tired King. Let's move on to the tale called The Life of Chuck. Now this is a hard left turn, or is it a right turn, after the first novella. I don't know if Stephen King is a giant fan of Theodore Sturgeon, like I am, but this was mining the same inspiration and similar material. I wouldn't even call this horror. This is more like old school speculative fiction, often found in classic Twilight Zone episodes and short story collections by Theodore Sturgeon. It opens with a series of major calamities ravaging the planet, and this is told through the eyes of a divorced English teacher. And in the middle of this calamity, billboards commemorating a man called Chuck Krantz keep popping up everywhere. Billboards, radio adverts, television adverts, you name it. And shortly after that, life of the titular Chuck is retold in medias res. And honestly, laying out the plot would be pointless, because the point is in execution of the twist and the breaks in the narrative, because there are 3 sections to this story. First one is the divorced English teacher observing the collapse of the reality. The second one is life and childhood of Chuck. And the last one is kind of tying it all together, or at least trying to. As one of the chapters, because this one is actually written as a novella, right, is titled I Contain Multitudes, the whole novella could be summarized by this title. It's an exploration of maybe even solipsism, about circular nature of things. It's also a lot of King's writing about, well, writing, because when you think about it, what does it mean to create a character, a person? When we say that a character is well written, what we mean is he reads like a person. And what does that even mean? It's difficult to quantify that, right? A whole person, a whole world. I am my own person. I imagine Chuck being a person. But when I read about Chuck, I only contain a slice of his essence. But what if this person had whole life outside of them? People they met, people they interacted with, people they impacted. So as a conclusion, I love the idea, but I think I'm more in love with the idea than I am appreciative of the execution, because I think it's uneven. The first part with the teacher read a bit like Insomnia, maybe. It's kind of a when was the Insomnia written? Late 80s, early 90s, I think. And it has a bit of the playful, quote-unquote, absurdism of it. But once it switched to Chuck, I never got a feel for characters. I did appreciate the twist, and it got me thinking, but I have to give it 2.5 stars. Next story is The Titular If It Bleeds. And this is kind of an outlier in the collection because it is not standalone. I mean, obviously it's published as a novella, so I guess technically it is, but it's a continuation of a previous work, direct continuation, not even a cameo King universe or Dark Tower universe, but an actual honest continuation. This might as well be called The Outsider 1.5. So it continues the story of the investigator Holly Gibney, one that I like but don't love. Same thing with Outsider, I merely liked it. And there's been a bombing at a local middle school, and there are numerous children casualties. And Holly investigates this event, this occurrence, with local news reporter who was first on the scene, and then it's concluded she concludes there's something really off with the footage of the bomber and with the entire case. The story is actually about tracking of a different monster, but what's the interesting part, at least to me, is the process of kind of character development for Holly. She reveals more about herself here, or at least King does, and I think I'm starting to like her more as a character, and maybe this is a disservice to her and King's writing, but I think she's changed to the point where I'm beginning to see more and more similarities with another King character, Ellen Pangborn. Ellen Pangborn is a character from Needful Things, and well, he is kind of a all-around policeman, good guy, everyman character that King toyed with in his previous work, and that's why I enjoyed it. Ultimately, I think that you should only read this if you read The Outsider, because I don't think it's standalone. I don't think you'll get most of it without the build-up from the previous book, because some of the setups here are actually from The Outsider. So there's that. I give it 3 stars. It's not terrible, but it's better than Life of Chuck, but I almost wish it was more standalone. I almost wish that every story in this collection was completely unrelated to any of the previous King's work, at least not narratively. Thematically, sure. Last book in this collection is called Rat, and it stars Drew Larson, and he is, like many King's protagonists, a writer. And not only that, he's a writer who teaches writing and has a sort of a creative block, and never seems to crack the novel length form. Each of his previous attempts to write long form has resulted in a complete and utter mental meltdown. That is until he gets an idea for a novel fully formed in his head, like from beginning to an end, top to bottom, full novel. He just needs to put it on a page. And being on a sabbatical, he goes to this isolated family cabin in the middle of nowhere to seclude himself and to finish it. His writing starts great, and then he gets sick and trapped there because there is a storm that also happens, and his writing also stops, and he is trapped there until a rat, who for some reason he saved from death, offers him a chance to finish the book for a price. Now, a deal with the devil, a literal Faustian bargain, it's an ancient trope. It's a trope as old as literature. Here, I don't think the morality of it is even the point or the punchline. I think it's more an examination of what it means to be a failure in relation to writing, a very self-aware critique of what it means to succeed in a literary world, what it means to succeed in a literary world in relation to yourself and your own expectations. Is it enough to merely finish it and have it done and get it out of the system, put it on a desk and walk away? I think it's all this theme is reinforced with frequent mentions of other writers that teach writing, because the main character is someone who teaches creative writing. People like Jonathan Franzen are directly name dropped here. It's generally, the way I would describe it, this is a tale from a writer for writers. It was very enjoyable. I do think King covered these themes numerous times. I mean, the first two books that come to mind are The Dark Half and even Bag of Bones, which I know Bag of Bones is not as popular. I still like it. It has its problems, but I like it. And I actually think those two are much more rereadable than Rat. But as a one and done novella, it's excellent. It's my second favorite, 3.5 stars. So there's that, folks. Slightly different format because I think King warrants it. And what did you think? I enjoyed it. I dearly missed his short stories because I think King is a wonderful, wonderful short story writer, and some of his best work is via short stories. I think with short stories, his number one, even self-revealing critique is that he sucks at endings. And most often than not, with short stories, he lands the ending pretty much always. So there's that. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.